scene.
And this fairly accurately portrays the footprint that you observed as placard number 2 at the scene.
It does.
Your Honor, I'd offer this as the next exhibit.
No objection.
It may be marked as the next exhibit without objection.
I can publish that, please. Placing what's now 376. On the overhead, this is the photograph that I just showed you.
Yes.
And this is the natural size of that footwear impression, also known as location placard number 2.
Correct.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor? Sir, if you would, I'm just going to ask you to explain to us how you were then able to, first of all, did you make a comparison of these two items?
I did.
Okay, and just describe, how did you do that?
It's simply an overlay, again, knowing that this known impression is the size of the impression, that's the size of the known shoe, and this has been enlarged to natural size, so we know this is the impression as we saw it at the scene. And it's simply placing the known impression over the top of the placard to the unknown impression. And once that is done, features within the impression are now compared visually to the class characteristics that the known impression has.
And can you explain or describe for us, what did you find when you overlaid the transparency from the left shoe of 356 onto the natural size photograph found at the scene?
Well, the first areas that were observed are...
Can I do this actually, if it'd be easier?
It would be.
Would you prefer, would it be easier to show that on the overhead or on the screen here with the marker?
It would be easy to show it over the overhead.
With the court's permission, could you be allowed to approach the Okay, so I'm just going to can you see that? I'm sure if you come over here, you can see something.
So the first features that I lined it up on and agreed with class characteristics within this known impression. The line starting at this line down here on the bottom, which I would describe as a wavy herringbone type line. Then you go to the second line, that is an agreement as well. The third line, which is an agreement. The area on the right side of the left shoe is this large void area, and that is also in agreement with the Retro 11. On the bottom half, on the bottom part of the heel, there is a void area in the bottom of an Air Jordan tread design that goes laterally with the bottom of the heel, and that is an agreement. There is another void created that allowed air to project up into the impression, and that is on the right side of the bottom of the heel. And the other area that is an agreement is this area which is a void on the left side of the sneaker, about halfway between the midsole and the front of the sneaker. And then there is a small notch that's created by the sneaker that allowed an area to come up through there. It's a void, so the dirt projected up into that void area. So it's in the furrow area. So those were the areas that I saw that were in agreement with this known shoe.
And if I could have you just back to the witness box, thank you. Sir, if you could, beginning at the bottom, and with that marker, you would indicate the areas of agreement that you just described to this jury.
Okay, starting on the bottom of the heel of the shoe.
Well, Your Honor, you just did this, I objected.
Yes, objection sustained.
Your Honor, the only thing I'd say is there's some...
If there's something else, if there's something different that has not already been pointed out, he may.
Sir, was there any additional areas of agreement that you'd like to point out?
No.
Now, with regard to those areas of agreements, were you able to formulate an opinion to a reasonable degree of certainty whether the shoe, the Nike Air Jordan 11 Retro Low, was consistent with the footwear impression that you found at Placard 2?
Yes, my opinion was that it was similar in manufacturing and design, in physical size. And by physical size, I mean the relative location of these components within the footwear impression, and were consistent with the Retro 11 Air Jordan size 13.
Sir, did you also examine any other shoes, Nike Air Jordans with that similar pattern but in a different size?
I did.
Okay, and what size were those?
Size 12 and size 11.
And just tell us, what did you find when you compared the size 12, the same outsole design, to the photograph of the footwear impression, also known as Placard 2?
The shared manufacturing and design of the Air Jordan outsole. However, due to the size, they were excluded.
And obviously 11, the 11 that you, because were you able to exclude the 12?
That's correct.
So 11 with that.
And 11 was excluded as well.
Now, going back to the scene at on John Beach, you recall going to the scene on June 22nd of 2013?
I did.
And the purpose of your visit on that date was what?
A further attempt to recover evidence.
Okay. And what where was the attempt made to recover evidence?
The attempt to recover evidence was at the site, the location of where the victim laid, and the attempt to recover was spent projectiles.
Okay. Now, when you had gone back, you were familiar with the area where the body had been a few days before. Is that right, on the 17th?
I was.
And were you, at some point, was there some markings made on the ground to designate the approximate location of his body?
There were.
Now, what did you do at that location?
I was joined by Sergeant Kevin Halley, the Crime Scene Services Unit. We dug underneath where the red-brown stains were, underneath where Mr. Lloyd's body lay, and we sifted the dirt as we shoveled this dirt out in an attempt to find these spent projectiles.
Okay. And were you successful in that endeavor?
Yes, we located 2 of them.
Okay. And where were they in relation to where you had seen the body a few days before?
Under his chest area.
Okay.
And underneath his back, actually.
Now, At that location, did you then also take some measurements?
I did.
And what did you measure?
I measured from the tire track that was close to Mr. Lloyd's feet to a rounded stone that I recognized from previous photographs that was approximately a foot above his head.
Okay. So I'm just going to show you these 4 photographs, ask you if you recognize what's depicted in them.
Yes, this is the gravel pit photos that I took on June 22nd of 2013.
And do they fairly accurately portray the scenes that you photographed?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'd offer these as the next exhibit.
No objection.
Maybe mark this next one.
$377.8 for the date.
Thank you. May I publish these? So I'm just placing 377A on the overhead. You recognize this photograph?
I do.
You just tell us what is this?
That is the gravel pit with the perspective of being beyond where Mr. Lloyd was laying, looking down towards where the tire tracks and the footwear impressions are off to the left. You still can see some of the plastic remaining. And the tire tracks in this photo also have, I put cones on top of the tire tracks so you could see the approximate location as they move through the pit. Or at least the outside tire track that's closest to the victim.
Now, did you also, there's some markings made around with the approximate area of his body.
Yes.
Is that shown in this photo?
Yes.
Is this area here?
Right, there's a semicircle with the letter H next to it.
What does that represent, sir?
Head.
And was there also a corresponding mark down below?
Correct.
And what was that?
I don't know if there was actually a letter put there, but that would indicate just below where his feet were.
Okay. Is this photograph taken after you did some digging?
Yes.
Is this the area, is this area showing the area that you dug?
Correct, and you can still see the yellow flags that indicated where the projectiles were located in that scene.
And sir, actually you had indicated you could see in this photograph location that plastic we talked about earlier in your testimony.
Correct. It's actually, if you look down there, there is 2 pieces of plastic. This plastic here is not the plastic I'm referring to. This larger piece is not what I'm referring to. That was loose plastic. I believe it was loosened during the digging process. A little further down, you'll see a shiny area. That area there is the plastic in question that was embedded in the ground on the same evening that we were there, June 17th.
And again, that designates that area we've been talking about as placard 2.
Correct. That's that washed out area where silt and sand sifted down the hill.
I'm just showing you 377B. Is this just a different perspective of that same area?
Yes, now I'm looking up the hill, and you see the tape measure in place. The rock is approximately right on top of the tire track, and so the tape is going up towards where Mr. Lloyd laid.
Now, sir, when you were at this location, Well, first of all, are you familiar with what's referred to as acceleration marks?
Yes.
Okay, well, what is that?
When a vehicle begins and does not have traction, it will, if it's on tar or on a hard surface, the wheels may spin. If it's on sand and gravel, it just may loosen up some ground as it gains traction before it starts moving.
Did you note any acceleration marks in the area when you were there June 22nd, 2013?
Yes.
And where is that? Is
Right
that shown here?
Where the cone is sitting on that black pebbly gravel substance or tar substance.
Is that an area, am I accurately pointing to that area?
Yes.
And just with regard, sir, to the positioning of Mr. Lloyd's feet in this photograph, you indicate where his head was, how about his feet?
His feet is that semi-orange circle, a little bit above that, right in this area here.
Am I accurately pointing there?
You are.
And this material over here, this, can you just, do you know where this came from?
Yes, we had set up a tarpaulin in that area, and as we removed dirt, we sifted it. It went into the tarpaulin. What you're seeing is results of that tarpaulin being tipped. It's in an effort to, make sure we didn't miss any evidence during the sifting process. It would, go down into the tarpaulin.
So was that created on June 22nd?
That's right.
I'm going to show you now 377C. Recognize the scene depicted in this photograph, sir.
Yes.
What does this show?
Again, looking up the hill from the tire track, you can just catch the glimpse of the rock that's sitting on top of the tire track. The tape measure is extended up into the area where Mr. Lloyd, his final rest, and that round or flat rock at the top is the area that I used to show where Mr. Lloyd's head was. That was about a foot above his head in the photos taken on June 17th.
And now at 377D, recognize this photograph, sir.
Yeah, now it's more of a close-up of the tape right at that flat rock.
Okay, and that's the rock you're pointing, I think you said Mr. Lloyd's head is approximately a foot below that.
That would be correct.
And so, did you measure the distance from that tire track to the top of where his head lay?
Yes,
Okay, and what was that approximate distance?
13 feet 6 inches.
You know, if I could approach you into the overhead. I'm just going to show you marked as 71. Are you familiar with the scene, sir?
Yes.
And what does this scene depict?
This is a picture taken looking out of the gravel pit towards John Deach Boulevard. I believe it was a picture taken on the 17th, and you can catch sight of the tire track moving through this black pebbly gravel or tar substance. The perspective of the picture, Mr. Lloyd would be behind the area where this picture was taken. The footwear impressions would be off to the left, and that would be the exit to take to leave that that gravel pit.
And I'm just going to focus your attention that a minute ago I was asking you about acceleration marks. You make note of this area here, so.
Yes, that's where I observed them.
And just describe the ground in that area.
It was just moved around. It was disturbed.
Sir, in the course of making, you've indicated that you made transparency from the left shoe of the Nike Air Jordan Retro 11, is that right?
Yes.
And did you also use some other method of taking an impression of the shoe?
I did.
And what method is that?
It was the use of a substance called biofoam.
Okay, and just if you would explain to the jury, what is biofoam?
Biofoam, it is a foam type material, and when depressing into this foam type material, whatever you depress into it, it will retain the characteristics of the item. And in this case, I depressed the Retro 11s, and I also believe in the other one I depressed the Air Jordan Futures into this in a further attempt to gain the ability to see the class characteristics that are on the bottom of the shoe tread. So this is helpful because now we are seeing what it would look like on the ground, not when you flip the shoe over, which is the mirror image. So you put it on this biofoam, and now you can see what the image of the class characteristics of the bottom of the shoe would look like, and you can retain that and make observations from that.
Okay. Does it give you a three-dimensional perspective of the sole of the shoe?
It does.
Okay, Your Honor, may I approach? I'm just going to show you this item and ask you if you take a look at it.
Yes.
Okay, do you recognize that?
Yes.
What do you recognize that to be?
This is the first one I did on the Jordan Futures, the Air Jordan Futures, and that is depressing the shoe tread into this biofoam and capturing the detail that is on the bottom of the shoe.
Okay. And you said this was the first one you did. Did you do another one?
I did.
Take a look at this one, if you would.
Yes.
And you recognize that?
I do.
And what do you recognize that to be?
This is the second one I did, utilizing the Air Jordan Retro 11, size 13, and depressing this into the biofoam to capture features of the class characteristics of the shoe tread.
And this shoe was, whose shoe?
This shoe here?
Yes, sir.
A shoe that was brought to the lab. It's a Retro 11.
And the Retro 11 is the, in terms of the sizing compared to the transparency, is there anything different about this one?
No.
Okay. And how about, did you make comparisons with the Future between this biofoam and that one?
Yes.
And was there any difference in terms of the characteristics and design?
I saw no differences.
Your Honor, I would offer these, or ask that these be marked as an exhibit.
Is there anything written on the outside? I have no objection to the actual. I have no objection, Your Honor.
Maybe not as the next exhibit.
showed him this exhibit 378, the second one, retro, is 379. I don't know if I can publish this. Sir, this material, is it fair to say it's fragile?
It is.
So what I have on is 378, which is the expression of the future. Do you recognize that?
I do.
I'm putting on 379. And that would be the impression of the Nike Air Jordan Retro 11. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, sir, just directing your attention to November 24th of 2014, were you working on that date?
I was.
And on that date, did you participate in the execution of a search warrant?
I did.
And where was that search warrant executed? Do you remember the address?
Is that 22 Ronald Meyer Drive? Yes.
And the purpose of the search warrant on that date, were you looking for particular items?
Yes.
And what items were you looking for?
We're looking for 3 pairs of sneakers.
Okay, and what kind of sneakers were you looking for?
We were looking for a pair of Retro 11, white patent leather sneakers. We were looking for a pair of Creative Rec Low Cesario sneakers, and we were looking for a pair of brown Spizike hiking boots, Air Jordan.
And again, during the course of your testimony, I've shown you pairs of those types of shoes. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Just a moment here. I could use that right now. So I'm placing 232 on the overhead. Just directing your attention to these shoes. Do you recognize this type of shoe, sir?
Yes.
What do you recognize that to be?
Air Jordan Retro 11s.
And right next to it?
Those are the Air Jordan hiking boots, Spizikes.
And just right below it here.
Those are the Creative Rec Los Acerios.
And on the date of November 24, 2014, did you search that same area, that closet area?
Yes.
And what, if anything, did you find? Did you find any of those shoes?
No.
Let me just instruct you that this evidence has been admitted for a limited purpose. To the extent that you may find it relevant, you may consider the witness's testimony regarding what was not located during a search in November of 2014 as part of your overall assessment of the adequacy of the police investigation in this case and for no other purpose. You may
Come may I approach? I'm just going to show you a photograph. Ask you if you recognize it.
Yes.
Do you what do you recognize that to be?
That is the same closet that you just showed me a photo of. Essentially the same angle. It's a little bit higher.
Okay. And on what date was this photograph taken?
November 24th.
2014.
That's correct.
You know, if I could have it printed off, this is the next exhibit.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor, sorry.
It may be marked as the next exhibit.
Thank you. I published this one. I'm placing 380 on the overhead. Recognize this is the photo I just showed you.
Yes.
Does that fairly depict the, what was located in the closet on that tape?
Yes.
Now, you indicated the three pairs of shoes that you were looking for were not present. Did you search other areas of the home?
We did.
What other areas did you search?
We searched a large walk-in closet adjacent to the master bedroom that contained a large amount of footwear, including sneakers.
Okay. Were there other areas of the house searched as well?
Yes.
And to the extent that that home was searched for those shoes, did anyone find shoes matching the description of what you were looking for?
No.
If I could have one moment, Your Honor, please. No further questions. Thank you, Your Honor.
Good afternoon, Lieutenant.
Good afternoon, Counselor.
You've been with the Massachusetts State Police for 28 years, right?
Yes, sir.
And you've been involved in this investigation from June 17th, 2013 through today, right?
Yes.
In fact, you were promoted from sergeant to lieutenant during the course of this investigation, right?
Yes, sir.
When did that occur, sir?
August of 2014.
Okay. Now, am I correct that you have met with Trooper Eric Benson, the lead investigator, dozens of times over the past 21 months regarding this case?
That would be accurate.
Okay. And is it fair to say that you've met with the prosecutors numerous times over the past 21 months regarding this case as well.
That also would be accurate.
And you've met numerous times with many other members of the prosecution team over that same time span, haven't you?
Yes, but yes.
Okay. And you're part of that team. Is that fair to say?
No,
You don't consider yourself part of the prosecution team in this case, Lieutenant?
I do not.
Okay. You consider yourself a detached and independent scientist? Is that what you're telling us?
I'm not a scientist.
Okay. But you don't consider yourself part of the prosecution team?
I do not.
Okay. Well, is it fair to say, sir, that you've done lots of things in this case other than footwear impression analysis?
I coordinated this case, but I had a lot of help.
You had a lot of help from a lot of other law enforcement personnel who were participating, right?
When I mean help, I mean other members of the lab that work with me.
Okay. Other members of the lab did work on this case, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. But you personally have done lots of different things over the past 21 months in this case, haven't you?
I have done a lot of things on this case.
Okay.
That is correct.
Okay. And some of them involve supervising other people, right?
Yes, sir.
And some of them involve doing stuff yourself, right?
That would be accurate.
Okay. So just to go over, so just in the first week of this investigation, you were at the scene on June 17th, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And the following day, June 18th, you personally photographed the execution of a search warrant at Mr. Hernandez's home, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And also on that same day, June 18th, 2013, you asked the CARS unit of the Mass State Police to do some forensic mapping, right?
I think the initial request was on the 17th, Counselor.
Okay.
I know it continued into the 18th, though.
Okay, but that was your request, right?
Yes.
Okay. And the day after that, one day later, on the 19th of June, you directed crime lab personnel to collect some gunshot residue stubs from the Altima, right?
No, sir.
Okay. That was not at your direction? Is that what you're telling us?
That is correct. It was not at my direction.
You don't recall that was at your direction?
I do not.
Show your document, sir. Draw your attention to that part. Does that refresh your recollection that you requested on June 19th, 2013, that gunshot residue stubs be collected from the Nissan Altima?
I see what this form
No, I'm
says.
sorry, I don't want you to, the form is not in evidence. I just want you to tell us if that refreshes your recollection that you made that request to other members of your lab on June 19th.
I see this, yes.
Okay. And I think on direct examination, you mentioned that term. You mentioned that the initials GSR, right?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And GSR stands for gunshot residue, right?
It does.
Okay. And one of the areas of the Nissan Altima that you had gunshot residue stubs taken of was the steering wheel, right?
Counselor, I do not have a clear recollection of telling anyone to do that. I
Okay.
see the form you've given me. I do not have a clear recollection of that. It's not
Okay.
something I do.
Okay. Well, you have knowledge of GSR, right?
Rudimentary, but yes.
Okay.
It's not a test I perform.
Okay. Well, based on your rudimentary knowledge of GSR, why would somebody test for GSR on a steering wheel?
Objection.
Objection is sustained given the witness's testimony as to his level of knowledge.
Well, you told us that moving along that same week to the 22nd of June, you returned to the scene and you personally did some digging looking for other evidence, right?
I did.
Okay. And also on that same date, June 22nd, you asked the CARS unit to do some additional forensic mapping, right?
I did.
Okay. And that was all just the first week, right?
First 5 days.
Okay, first 5 days. And you've done other stuff since then, right? Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay. And you've participated in many meetings about this case, right?
Yes.
Okay. And over the course of the last 21 months, you've developed a lot of knowledge about the case, haven't you?
Yes.
You've learned about a lot of the evidence in this case that has nothing to do with footwear impressions, haven't you, sir?
I think that's accurate.
You've learned about the results of some witness interviews, haven't you?
I don't believe so.
You don't think you've ever developed any knowledge of what any other witnesses in this case have said to the state police during the course of the investigation? Is that your testimony, Lieutenant?
I'm not saying I haven't heard certain things along the way. That would not be true. I have heard certain things. I have not been involved in any of those interviews or conducted any of those. But certainly, yes, I've heard some stuff by being around, investigating when this is being said, yes.
You've heard a lot of stuff about this case over the last 21 months, haven't you, sir?
Be more specific as to what he's talking about.
Hold on.
I am familiar with this case primarily forensically, but I have definitely heard information about the investigative part of the case.
Okay.
That is true.
Okay. Now, would you agree with me that in doing a forensic, an objective forensic examination, it's important to be independent?
Yes.
Because you don't want your testing and your test results to be influenced by colleagues involved in other facets of the investigation, do you?
I wouldn't want it influenced by anybody.
I'm sorry?
I would not want it influenced by anybody, whoever that was.
Anybody, and that includes your colleagues involved in other facets of the investigation, right?
That is correct.
Because that could result in bias infecting your testing and your test results, right?
It could.
And you wouldn't want that to happen, would you?
Certainly not.
Are you familiar with the report of the National Academy of Science, National Resource Council on Forensic Science, issued in 2009?
I am.
Okay. And do you agree that examiners who work for law enforcement are subject to a general risk of bias?
Confirmational bias exists. It
So
is a
you
hu-
mentioned the term confirmational bias, right?
Well, it's mentioned in the National Academy of Science when you
Okay.
talk about bias.
Okay. Confirmational bias, what does that term mean to you, sir?
What it means to me is if I see something and I infect the person and verifying it and inject my thoughts on it, it would influence him.
Because it could lead you to see or think you see what you hope and expect to see, right?
That's the theory of it.
Well, do you disagree that confirmation bias exists, sir?
I do not.
Would you agree that it's important to avoid outside influence of any kind in performing your examinations?
That would be the ideal, yes.
Okay. And that's particularly true, is it not? Because footwear impression comparisons are largely subjective, right?
No, they're not subjective.
You don't consider them
I do not.
subjective? Okay. Well, is there a fixed number of characteristics that have to line up in order for you to make a conclusion about a footwear comparison, sir?
No.
Are there any statistics in your field that you can provide as to whether an impression and a shoe are a 1 in a 20 chance or 1 in a million chance or anything like that?
No.
Are there any machines that you run the impression and the transparency through that spits out some kind of a result as to whether or not, in the opinion of the machine, there's a match?
I know of none.
Okay. It's basically you eyeballing the transparency and the impression and deciding what you think, right?
Not exactly. I wouldn't say that's true, no.
Okay. Well, didn't you tell us on direct examination that in this case, you took a transparency and you put it on top of an impression, right?
That is true.
Okay. And you looked at it with your eyes, right?
Yes.
And you drew some conclusions about what you saw, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you don't consider that subjective?
I do not.
Okay. Is it fair to say that over the course of your career, you've testified many times in court?
I have.
You've been cross-examined by people like me lots of times?
Yes, I have.
You're an experienced witness?
I guess you would consider that, yes, it's true.
You met with the prosecutors to prepare your testimony, didn't you?
Yes,
When was the last time you met with the prosecutors? Before
Last
you
night.
got on the stand today?
last night.
Did you ever meet me before?
No, sir.
Would you agree with me, Lieutenant, that the opinions that you offered today are based on your training and experience?
Yes.
Okay. Sure, I'm showing you a document. Do you recognize that to be a copy of your curriculum vitae?
It is.
Okay. And other than the fact that it refers to you as a sergeant rather than a lieutenant, is it accurate?
It is.
Thank you. Now, you testified in direct examination about your training in the area of footwear impression examination, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you told us on direct examination that you had taken courses on that subject, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, isn't it a fact, sir, that you've taken exactly one 3-day class in footwear impression comparison and identification 9 years ago in 2006?
That is accurate.
Now, you're familiar with the International Association for Identification, the IAI, aren't you?
I am, sir. I'm a member. Yes.
You're a member of the IAI.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, then you know, do you not, that that organization has a certification program for footwear examiners, right?
I am aware of that.
Okay. And to be certified as a footwear examiner, you have to take a written test, and then you have to take a casework test, right?
That is correct.
And you have to pass both of those tests to be certified as a footwear examiner, right?
Yes.
You're not certified by the IAI as a footwear examiner, are you?
I am not.
You've never taken that test, have you?
I have not.
Are you familiar with some of the protocols that have been published in the area of footwear impression examination?
Specifically by...
Well, let's start with, do you ever hear of an organization called SWGTREAD? That's the acronym, SWGTREAD?
Yes, a scientific working group? Yes.
Right, okay. So you've heard of that, right?
Certainly.
Okay. And you know then, do you not, that SWGTREAD that's a scientific working group set up by the Department of Justice for footwear examiners, right?
And tire track.
Footwear and tire track examiners.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you know that SWGTREAD has published guidelines, right?
I am.
Okay. Are you familiar with those guidelines?
Verbatim, no.
Well, in general, are you familiar with them?
Certainly.
Okay. Now, would you agree with me that, based on those guidelines, that proper photography of a footwear impression is essential?
Yes.
Okay. And proper photography of a footwear impression involves a number of different elements, right?
Yes.
Okay. And one of those elements is the use of a tripod, or what you used in this case, you said it was a quadrupod?
Yes, sir.
Okay, a quadrupod is kind of a four-legged tripod?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And another element of proper photography of a footprint impression is that you have to have adequate lighting, right?
Yes.
And to do a proper photograph of a footwear impression, am I right that the camera lens has to be parallel to the impression?
Actually perpendicular. It's got to be 90 degrees
All right,
to the
I'm sorry,
impression.
90 degrees
Yeah.
to the impression.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And also, you have to have a ruler or some other kind of a scale in the photograph, right?
Yes.
Okay. And the protocols that have been published by Swigtred also address, do they not, the use of transparencies as test impression standards?
Yes.
Okay. And you told us about transparencies a few minutes ago, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you told us, did you not, that you make transparencies so comparisons can be made?
Yes.
Okay. So the transparency that you make is of the known shoe, right?
Yes.
Okay. So you make a transparency of the known shoe, and then you compare it with the unknown impression. That's basically what you do, right?
That is correct.
Okay. And that's exactly what you did in this case, right?
Yes.
Okay. And before you can use the transparency, you have to enlarge the photographic impression so that it corresponds in size 1:1. Is that what you have to do?
To create a natural size photo, yes, Counselor.
Okay. And that's what you did, that's what you told us a few minutes ago you did in this case, right?
I did.
Okay. But that's what transparencies are for, to make comparisons, right?
To assist in the comparison process, certainly.
Okay. Now, am I correct that the Swigtred protocols also lay out a number of what they call a range of conclusions that you can reach as an examiner?
Yes.
Okay. And do you agree that an inconclusive result occurs when there is not sufficient quality or quantity of information from the questioned impression to reach a meaningful scientific conclusion?
Yes.
Okay. And so where an impression lacks sufficient detail, under Swigtred's protocols, no comparison can be conducted, right?
Correct.
Because if, in the opinion of the examiner, the impression lacks sufficient detail, it lacks sufficient detail to make a comparison to something else, right?
Yes.
And in fact, your own laboratory has its own manual, right?
That is correct.
And your own laboratory's footwear, tire track, and other imprints procedure manual lays out its own range of conclusions, right?
Yes.
And you're obligated to follow that manual, right?
Yes.
Okay. And that manual provides, does it not, that where there are, quote, insufficient class characteristics or individual characteristics to make a determination of the impression, or the impression was of insufficient quality the conclusion is inconclusive, right?
Correct.
So in order to make a comparison, you've got to have sufficient quality and quantity of detail in the impression that you're going to compare to a shoe, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, Lieutenant, let me turn to the specific things that you did in this case. You told us that on June 17, 2013, you responded to the scene.
Correct.
And on your way to the scene, you got a call from Sergeant Baker.
Correct.
Okay. You didn't call him. He called you.
Yes.
Okay. And am I correct, sir, that when Sergeant Baker called you, you have no idea whether Detective Origi of the North Attleboro Police Department had scooped up evidence at the scene on his own before Baker called you? Do you?
I don't know that to be true or not. I don't know that.
Right, you don't know one way or the other, right?
I don't know the order.
Okay. So you responded to the scene and you told us there were lots of law enforcement officers there, right?
They were.
Okay. And were they wearing shoes?
Yes, they were wearing shoes
Okay.
that night.
And you told us on direct examination that after you got there, I think you said you took overall pictures, right?
Yes.
Okay. What are overall pictures, please?
Those are a panoramic view. You're looking at the bigger scene. You're looking at, not the evidence close up. You're looking at the bigger scene.
So kind of a widescreen
Yes.
look?
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Okay. And are those the only photographs that you personally took that night?
I took a few more after that, yeah.
Well, what else did you take photographs of?
Photographs of the body, photographs of the tops in place,
Okay.
photographs of the body after the top had been removed, photograph of the tire track area after the top had been removed. I'm sorry, the tire track area when the top was removed. I took an overall photo of that.
Did you take any of the photographs that were shown to you on direct examination? If you know.
I don't recall.
Okay. Well, am I correct that you did not take photographs of footwear impressions that night?
I did not.
Okay. But you did direct Trooper Sylvia to photograph two footwear impressions, one at placard 2, which was later labeled 9-1-09, and one at placard 3, which was later labeled 9-1-10, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And now, there were lots of other footwear impressions there in that area that night, weren't there?
Yes, in the area of the tire track, yes.
Well, in the whole area of what we will call the scene, that is, the area you've been talking about, the area around where Mr. Lloyd's body was found, 50 feet in all directions, there were lots of other footwear impressions there, weren't there, sir?
None that I observed anywhere near the body.
Well, that wasn't my question, was it, sir?
Jack, 50 feet is...
Well, in that 50 feet area,
Yes, sir.
there were the two impressions,
Yes, sir.
placard 2 and 3, in that sandy area there. There were none more in that area. And then 30 to 50 feet going out of the pit, there were a number of footwear impressions that now were covered by the top. There were no other footwear impressions in that 20-foot, 30-foot circle around the body. ground was so hard, nothing was impressing on it. I did not observe any other footwear impressions other than the ones near the tire tracks and over by where placard 2 and 3 were in that 50-foot radius that you've quoted.
So all of the footwear impressions that you testified about on direct examination, that when you were looking at the shoes of the first responders, those were not in that area?
They were in that area of the tire track that was covered by the tarpaulin and adjacent to it, yes.
Okay. And that was within 50 feet, right?
Yes, it was.
Okay. And in fact, let's make it even bigger. If we went out as big as this courtroom, okay? Within an area as big as this courtroom from where the body was located, are you telling us there were not any other footwear impressions other than those two? Is that what you're telling us, sir?
That I observed, I did not observe any other footwear impressions in that one, whatever this courtroom area is.
Okay. Well, did you look?
Yes,
So you were looking for other footwear impressions. That's what you're telling us.
yes,
And the only ones you found within that area were two.
yes.
Okay.
Not counting the photos, the other footwear impressions in the tire track area.
Well, let's count those. Okay?
Yes,
There were other footwear impressions within that area, correct?
15.
There were 15 other footwear impressions, that's what you're telling us?
The ones that I've already worked on, yes.
Okay, we're going to get to those. You're telling us those were the only ones?
That I observed.
Okay. Now, you had no idea that night which footwear impressions might be important, right?
Well, I did.
So, you came to a scene where there's a body, and you know which footwear impressions are important and which ones are not important. Is that what you're telling us?
Yes.
Okay. And tell us how you decided that all of the footwear impressions, other than the two that you had Trooper Sylvia photograph, were not important.
When I first arrived, I was advised that there was an area where witnesses and police officers had stood. And I was shown this area, which was underneath the tire track and just adjacent to the tire track, and they were on top of the tire tracks.
Okay.
I was told that area had been stepped on by these witnesses and first responders. Because of that fact, Counselor, I did put less weight on those footwear impressions compared to the two impressions that were closer to Mr. Lloyd.
Okay. Well, there was a point that night, or that day, or sometime, before the first responders arrived, right?
Yes,
There was a point when Mr. Lloyd was shot and killed, right?
yes.
When you got there that night, Lieutenant, you did not know where the individual who shot Mr. Lloyd had walked or had run or was standing when he did that, do you?
I do not.
So the mere fact that there was an area where there had been a bunch of police officers standing around, that doesn't mean that the perpetrator of this crime hadn't been standing in that very same place, does it?
That is correct.
You had no idea, right? How could you?
Other than the information that was given to me, no.
But you decided to only document those two footwear impressions, right?
Right.
Sir, would you agree with me that William Bodziak is a well-recognized leading authority in the area of footwear impression evidence?
Yes.
And would you agree with me that his book, Footwear Impression Evidence, is recognized as authoritative in the field?
Yes.
Okay. You've seen this book before, right?
I have that.
Okay. Now, on direct examination, you were asked some questions about dental stone casting, right?
Correct.
Okay. And you understand that that's one way to document and preserve a footwear impression, right?
Three-dimensional.
Three-dimensional, okay. And remember on direct examination, Lieutenant, you were shown a whole bunch of different photographs of this same footwear impression, the one in placard 2, which was later labeled 9-1-09.
Yes.
Okay, and the one that's on the screen now is exhibit 237G. That's one of the photographs you were shown on direct examination, right?
Yes.
Okay. And that's a three-dimensional impression, isn't it, sir?
Yes.
So you had a three-dimensional footwear impression in the ground, but you chose not to make a three-dimensional dental stone cast of those impressions, right?
That is correct.
Okay. And you told us that that was based on your training and experience, right?
And the protocol that we follow.
Well, the protocol doesn't say, don't make a dental stone impression, does it, sir?
No, it does not.
Right. So you decided not to make a dental stone impression, right?
I did decide not to do a dental stone impression.
Okay. So I'm just going to read you a little excerpt of Mr. Bodziak's book on the subject of the importance of casting three-dimensional impressions, and ask you if you agree with him, okay?
Go ahead, Counsel.
Okay. I'm not going to read you the whole section. I'll read you the first few sentences and the last few sentences. This is from page 97 of Mr. Bodziak's book, Footwear Impression Evidence, 2nd edition. Quote, "The question is often asked as to whether it is necessary to cast every footwear impression located at the crime scene. The answer is yes, and there are many good arguments which support casting every impression." And let me just read you now the concluding portion of this section. "All impressions, whether in soil, sand, snow, or even underwater, are suitable for casting. Cast should always be made of three-dimensional impressions. Evidence that is left at the crime scene is lost forever." Close quote. Do you agree or disagree with Mr. Bodziak, sir?
I am aware of Mr. Bodziak's
Do
standing.
you agree or disagree with those statements, sir?
Your Honor, can I ask him to break that down, because that's a compound
Okay.
number.
Well, I will be happy to do that.
Thank you.
Do you agree with Mr. Bodziak, or do you disagree that casts should always be made of three-dimensional impressions.
I disagree.
You disagree. Okay. So based on your 1 3-day course in footwear examination in 2006, you have a different opinion than Mr. Bodziak, right?
The one sentence you just read to me, I disagree.
Okay. Well, do you agree with Mr. Bodziak that evidence that is left at the crime scene is lost forever?
I think that's an accurate statement.
Now, you told us on direct examination that in your opinion, photographs are better than dental stone casts, right?
It has been my experience that photographs have been more helpful to me in comparison.
Okay. And a photograph, that's two-dimensional, right?
That is correct.
Okay. And a cast is three-dimensional, right?
Yes.
And that impression in the ground that night, or those two impressions at placards 2 and 3, those were three-dimensional, right?
Agreed.
Okay. Now, you could have done both, right?
Yes.
But you didn't bother to do both, right?
I did not do both.
Now, on direct examination, you were not asked about the chronology of your work in this case, were you, sir?
Judge, I'm rejecting the suggestion. Somehow it should have been
Objection
certified.
sustained.
Well, you had these photographs of these two impressions as of June 17th, 2013, right?
Yes.
Okay. Did you do anything with those to examine or analyze those photographs of those two impressions in June of 2013?
No.
Did you do anything to analyze or examine those two impressions in July of 2013?
No.
How about August of 2013?
No.
How about September of 2013?
No.
October?
No.
November?
No.
December?
No.
Okay. 2014. Did you do anything to examine or analyze those two footwear impressions in January of 2014?
No.
How about February of 2014?
No.
Okay. And up to that time, you hadn't examined any other crime scene photos for any additional footwear impressions, had you?
No.
Okay. So am I correct that up until March of 2014, you did nothing in this case relating to footwear impressions at all?
Correct.
But you did examine them, did you not, on March 18th, 2014?
Yes.
Okay. And that was your first examination of the impression at placard 2, 9-01-9.
Yes.
Okay. And you documented your work
Yes.
that day
Yes.
on a worksheet, right?
Yes.
And that's your practice, right?
Yes.
Okay. And Trooper Mackin assisted you?
I don't recall.
Okay. Your documents are, let's see, somewhere. Does that refresh your recollection, excuse me, that you were assisted in your examination of these impressions on March 18, 2014 by Trooper Mackin?
Yes.
Okay. And the document I've shown you, is that your worksheet?
Yes.
Okay. That contains your notes that you made while you were doing this analysis, right?
Yes.
I'd offer this as an exhibit, Your Honor.
No objection.
Recommended not as next exhibit.
Mr. Farrar, could you turn on the monitor right there, sir?
And that no longer works.
Oh, all right. Well, I'll do the best I can. I'm showing you 381. This is, you said this is your worksheet for March 18, 2014, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And a little bit more. And you actually examined 3 different impressions on that day, right?
Yes.
Okay. And the first impression was 9109, right?
Yes.
That's the one that we've been talking about that was at placard number 2, right?
Correct.
Okay. And the second one, that's 9-1-10, that's the impression that was at placard 3, right?
Yes.
Okay. And this third one that you looked at, 42-2.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And that was a footwear impression that was on the back of the front seat of the Altima, right?
We object.
Well, tell us what 42-2 was, Lieutenant, if you know.
I do know 42-2 was not a footwear impression on the back of the Altima.
What was it?
It was a footwear impression on the back of the front passenger seat of a Chrysler 300 that I examined at North Attleboro PD on June 30th of 2013.
Okay, my apologies. So that was a footwear impression from a different vehicle.
That is correct.
Okay. So let's get back to 9-1-09. On this worksheet, you set forth your observations, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And am I correct that with respect to 9-1-09, you wrote footwear impression, very little detail, small amount of herringbone visible at the heel of impression, right?
Correct.
Okay. And after you completed your examination of these impressions in March, you wrote a report, right?
Yes.
Okay. And that report That's required under your protocols, right?
Yes.
To write a report that sets forth your findings, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you have to be accurate and complete in your report, right?
Yes.
Sir, is that a copy of the report that you wrote documenting the results of your examination of these footwear impressions on March 18th, 2014?
Yes.
And when you wrote your report, you were being as complete and accurate as possible, weren't you?
Yes.
And you were being as objective as possible, weren't you?
Yes.
And am I correct that with respect to 9-1-09, that is the impression at placard number 2, that your report stated, upon analysis, the above item was found to possess detail which lacked sufficient quality and quantity to conduct any further comparisons? Is that what you wrote?
That is part of my findings, yes.
You went on to write, did you not, this item was noted to have a small amount of a herringbone pattern in the heel area of the impression, right?
That is also correct.
I'm sorry?
That is correct.
And then you went on to write, did you not, even though there was not sufficient area in which to make comparisons, I was able to exclude item 43-4, both right and left shoes, due to the fact that it contained no herringbone pattern, right?
That was my statement, yes.
Okay. There's nothing else in your report about 9-1-09, right?
No.
Okay. That's the entirety of your results, right?
That is correct.
Okay. So you were able to see a herringbone pattern in 9-1-09, right?
Yes.
Okay. So since you could see a herringbone pattern in there, if you were comparing that, if you were looking at a shoe that had no herringbone pattern, you could say that non-herringbone shoe clearly couldn't have made that impression, right?
Yes.
Okay. But other than that, your finding was that that particular impression lacked sufficient quality and quantity to conduct any further comparisons, right?
That was my statement, yes.
Now, with respect to the impression at placard 3, 9-1-10, you made findings about that one too, right?
I did.
Okay. And with respect to that one, you found, did you not, that that one, the one at placard 3, did have detail that was sufficient for comparison?
I did.
Okay. So since that one had detail that was sufficient for comparison, as opposed to the other one that didn't, you went on to compare some of the first responder shoes that you had photographs of to the placard 3 impression, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And when you did that, I think you told us this on direct examination, that 2 pairs of the, what you knew to be first responder shoes were found to share a similar manufacturing design to the impression at placard 3.
Yes.
Okay. And then you further indicated, did you not, in your report with respect to the one at placard 3, that a more comprehensive analysis could not be made due to the limited information submitted?
I did say that, yes.
Okay. So you were being cautious, right, with respect to placard 3?
My statement related to I didn't have the shoes available to me.
Okay. Meaning you didn't have the first responder shoes?
I was acting on a photograph.
Okay. But you had enough detail in the impression from placard 3 to do comparisons. That was your finding, right?
Yes.
But you didn't have enough detail in the impression from placard 2 to do comparisons. That was your finding, right? Is that what you said in your report, sir?
But I also went on to say that I could exclude shoes that did not have that type of wave herringbone pattern.
Right. If there was no herringbone, you could exclude them, right?
That's what I said.
But other than that, you said, did you not, that 9-1-09 lacked sufficient quality and quantity to conduct any further comparisons, right?
That was my statement.
Now, did you do any further work regarding these two impressions? The placard, we'll call them placard 2. Placard 2 is 9-1-09 and placard 3 is 9-1-10. You understand that?
I do.
So I'll call them placard 2 and placard 3. Did you do any further work respecting the placard 2 or placard 3 impressions in the spring of 2014?
No, sir.
Did you do any further work regarding either of those two impressions in the summer of 2014?
No, sir.
Excuse me. Did you do any work regarding any of the other impressions that may have been present at the scene during the spring or summer of 2014?
No, sir.
In fact, did you do any work on footwear impressions in this case at all over the next 8 months? That is, from March 18th, 2014 up until November 20th of 2014.
I did not.
But on the morning of Thursday, November 20th, 2014, something happened, didn't it, Lieutenant?
Yes.
Okay. And the something that happened is that you met with the lead investigator in the case, Trooper Eric Benson, right?
Yes.
Now, Trooper Benson doesn't work for Crime Scene Services, does he?
He does not.
Trooper Benson is not a trained footwear examiner, is he?
Not to my understanding.
But do you recall that on the morning of November 20th, 2014, Trooper Benson told you that he, Trooper Benson, had compared the photograph of an outsole pattern on a Nike sneaker to a photograph of the impression at placard 2. Do you recall he told you that?
Yes.
And you recall that Trooper Benson further told you on the morning of November 20th, 2014, that he, Trooper Benson, believed that the outsole pattern of the Nike sneaker he had photographed was consistent with the photograph of the impression at placard 2 that he had examined. Recall he told you that?
Those exact words, I don't think so.
Okay. still in your document, directing your attention to the bottom couple of paragraphs. Please read that to yourself.
The last paragraph, Council?
This one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Does that refresh your recollection, sir?
I see what he said in his report, yes.
Okay. Well, does that refresh your recollection that Trooper Benson told you on the morning of November 20th, 2014, that he, Trooper Benson, had done this comparison and that he believed that the outsole pattern of a Nike sneaker he had photographed was consistent with the impression at Placard 2?
I still don't remember those exact words.
Okay.
He certainly spoke to me, but Counselor, I don't remember those exact words being said to me.
That's fair enough. Whatever his exact words, sir, do you recall that that was the gist of what he told you?
Yes.
Okay. And when he was referring to the impression at Placard 2, you understood that to be the very same impression that you had concluded back on March 18th, 2014, based on your examination, lacked sufficient detail to make any further comparisons, right?
With the ability to exclude herringbone patterns, yes.
Okay. And do you recall that in addition to telling you what he thought, Trooper Benson asked you to go back and look at that same impression, the one at Placard 2, again?
I had nothing to compare it to, so
Well,
there was a conversation, and the results of this conversation was, great, you saw something, I need the shoes to compare to this impression. That was the gist of the conversation.
okay. Well, but you had already made a finding in your report that that impression didn't have sufficient detail to compare it to anything. Isn't that correct, Lieutenant?
That's not what the report says. It's misleading.
Objection is saying you may read from the report.
Okay, thank you, Ron. Lieutenant, you had stated in your report with respect to that impression at Placard 2, did you not? Quote, upon analysis, the above item was found to possess detail which lacked sufficient quality and quantity to conduct any further comparisons. Close quote. Is that what you said in your report?
I object. He's not reading the back part of this report, which indicates he did make a comparison. It's misleading.
Overruled.
Did I read correctly from your report,
You're
sir? Yes or
leaving-
no?
No. You're leaving off the part of the herringbone.
All right, let me read the entire section.
Please.
Okay. Quote, upon analysis, the above item, that's Placard 2, right, was found to possess detail which lacked sufficient quality and quantity to conduct any further comparisons. That's the first sentence, right?
Correct.
Did I read that correctly?
You did, sir.
Okay. This item was noted to have a small amount of a herringbone pattern in the heel area of the impression. That's the second sentence, right?
Yes, sir.
Did I read that correctly?
Yes, you did, sir.
Okay. Even though there was not sufficient area in which to make comparisons, I was able to exclude item 43-4, both right and left shoes, due to the fact that it contained no herringbone pattern. That's
Yes,
the third sentence?
Absolutely.
I've read your complete report on that particular impression, correct?
That was my finding.
Do you recall that Trooper Benson asked you to perform a reanalysis of the footwear impression marked at placard 2?
Yes.
And do you recall that he also asked you to find somebody at Nike to try to identify some shoes from a photograph, some photographs that were in the possession of the state police?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And understood to have been taken at Mr. Hernandez's residence to send to somebody at Nike?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Showing you Exhibit 364, sir, do you recognize that to be one of the photographs that Trooper Benson provided to you to forward to somebody at Nike?
Yes, I took this photograph.
You took that photograph?
Yes, sir.
And when did you take that photograph, please?
June 18th, 2014.
That's Exhibit 364. That's the photograph you took on June 18th?
Yes, sir.
2014?
Yes, sir.
That you sent to somebody at Nike
Yes.
in November of 2014?
Yes, sir.
And am I correct, Lieutenant, that just after meeting with Trooper Benson, that same day, you contacted an individual at Nike named Herbert Hedges to request his assistance in identifying footwear in that photo?
Yes.
Okay. Now, am I correct that 5 days after you met with Trooper Benson and he requested that you do a reanalysis of the placard 2 impression, you did do a reanalysis of the placard 2 impression, right?
I did.
Okay. And you looked at the very same impression that you had looked at 8 months earlier in March, right?
Yes.
The same photographs that you showed us on direct examination, or that were shown to you on direct examination?
Yes.
This is 237J. This was one of the number of photographs taken of that impression at placard 2, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That was the impression that in March you said lacked sufficient detail to do any further comparisons, right? Except you could exclude shoes that don't have.
Yes, sir.
So, now, What you had regarding that impression, you had photographs of that impression, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That's all you had, right?
Yes, sir.
Those were photographs that had been taken back, they had been taken by Trooper Sylvia back on June 17th, 2013, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So those photographs hadn't changed at all between March of 2014 and November of 2014, had they?
That is correct.
Okay. Whatever was in those photographs in March was still in those photographs in November, right?
That is correct.
And whatever wasn't in those photographs in March wasn't in those photographs in November, right?
That would be accurate.
Okay. Is it fair to say that what did change between March and November was the lead investigator's expectation?
No.
Well, he asked you to look at it again, didn't he, in November? Yes or no, sir?
He did.
Okay. And you looked at it again, right? Yes or no?
With a pair of sneakers
Well,
available to
Before
me.
we get to a pair of sneakers, sir, whatever is in that photograph is in that photograph, right?
That is correct.
Has nothing to do with a pair of sneakers. It has to do with a photograph,
I would
right?
disagree.
Okay. Well, when you said in March of 2014 that the photograph of that impression lacked sufficient quality and quantity to conduct any further comparisons, what did you mean?
With the information I had in front of me, exactly what you read, Counselor.
The information you had in front of you was the photograph, right?
Yes, sir.
The conclusion that you reached in your report had to do with a photograph, right?
Yes.
You didn't say in your report, if you give me a pair of shoes, I'd be happy to make a comparison, did you?
No, I did not.
You said in your report that the photograph lacked sufficient quality and quantity to conduct any further comparisons.
Objection.
Didn't you?
It's a mistake. He's not reading that second statement in proper context.
Why don't you include in your question the last sentence?
Very well, Your Honor. You said, sir, in your report, did you not, that the photograph lacked sufficient quality and quantity to conduct any further comparisons, but it did have some herringbone in it, so you could exclude shoes that don't have herringbone.
That is accurate.
But on November 25th, 2014, you changed your opinion about that photograph, didn't you?
Yes.
In November of 2014, after speaking with Trooper Benson, you no longer said, doesn't have enough detail to make a comparison. Did you, sir?
Anything that Trooper Benson said to me...
That's not my question, sir. I'm asking about what you said in your report. You no longer said that in your report in November, did you?
Could you rephrase that question?
Yes, sir.
I need to hear it again.
Lieutenant, in November, after re-examining the placard 2 impression at the request of Trooper Benson, you no longer said, as you did in March, that the impression lacked sufficient quality and quantity to conduct any further comparisons, did you?
I said that after I had a pair of sneakers in front of me, not because Trooper Benson said it.
Well, that wasn't my question, sir.
Okay, then I did not, that's not true then.
What's not true?
the fact that Trooper Benson had a
That wasn't
conversation.
my question, sir. My
Well-
question was, I'm asking about you, not Trooper Benson. On November 25th, 2014, when you re-examined impression at Placard 2 at the request of Trooper Benson, you no longer said, as you had 8 months earlier, that it lacked sufficient quality and quantity to conduct any further comparisons, did you?
No, I did not.
Now you said something different, right?
Yes.
We're going to stop at this point. We'll resume tomorrow morning. Please keep your mind suspended. Continue to avoid anything about this case that could appear in any newspaper or television or radio or any other media or social media or Facebook or Twitter, anywhere else. Please continue to avoid speaking or emailing or texting or in any other fashion communicating in any form about this case with anyone, including each other. And if anyone starts to talk to you or communicate with you about this case or your jury service or Mr. Hernandez, end it immediately. And please do not do any research about the case or Mr. Hernandez or anything you think may be relevant to the case. Have a good evening.
Hear ye. All persons having anything further to do before the Honorable, the Justice Susan Dodge of the Superior Court, now sitting at Fall River within and for the Commonwealth, depart and give your attendance here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., to which time and place the sitting of this court is now adjourned. God save the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Court is now adjourned.
Telephone conversations. I guess at this point the Commonwealth has provided, as it indicated it would, the specifics. It's obviously a long filing. I wasn't sure of the timing and when I could expect a response from the Commonwealth.
We'll try and get a response to you tomorrow, Your Honor, if possible, and yes, we'll aim for that.
I would like a response which deals sort of by conversation, as the defendants have done, as opposed to a global argument. So with respect to each one dealing with relevancy or hearsay or any of the other objections that may have been made. Thank you very much. See you tomorrow.
Would all rise? Court's going to stand in recess.